Alrighty. You probably can't see much other than just sun, but anyway, whatever. Having one of these slightly more lazy days. Been losing a bit of motivation with the sewing. It's just, yeah, I've covered a lot of different designs, put it like that, and yeah, I'm running out of different things to do. I've got to do myself a ninja suit, but like a full body black thing, but what's the point? I think I'd wear it about as much as the cape, which quite frankly hasn't been worn outside of YouTube. So I don't see that there's really a point in doing that. I could also make up some chaps, which I still might, which are your, you know, like your cowboy chaps. There is a certain market for sort of heavy duty chaps, but a few people really even bother to use them. I know one guy who, oh geez, he'd be battling to even be 5 foot tall, and he's got the big fucking dual cab F250, which by the way, you know, weren't that common. They bought out a few of them here in Australia, and they were worth a fucking fortune. But he had a fucking fortune, so he went and bought one. And he'd sit there with the chaps on, and the fucking belt buckle that was, you know, fucking bigger than you could spread your damn hand out. And then he'd have his fucking fancy ass hat on. And honest to God, he's like 4'10", and he'd be sitting in this fucking colossal big bloody diesel V8 F250 dual cab, you know. Small man syndrome, I think. Small man trying to be big man. But anyway, I've sort of had a few more thoughts and whatnot. You know, in essence, yeah, these dating sites, they're only interested in... half the time they're interested in sending me hookup messages and not much else. Or I'm on there arguing with a feminist, or I'm fucking looking at some bizarre profiles. And long and short of it is, I had one girl who was serious about it. My sister said, what you should do is you just should randomly message all these different girls and just ask them if they're interested. And I said, yeah, but then they, you know, I'd go to meet them, I'd drive fucking an hour, and then they wouldn't turn up. Or they'd turn up the first time, get measured up, and then I'd need them to, you know, meet up a second time so they could have this fucking dress, and then, nah, wouldn't turn up. You know, I'll be quite honest, I have, after spending 2 years on dating sites on a serious note, I had one date in 2 years. And, you know, as you know, there was a girl there who I talked to for 6 months. She wasn't terribly far away from where I lived. That was the young pregnant woman. But we never met in person. We would talk for ages and never met in person. Not even as a friend, you know. And then there was the other Samoan girl, and that was 9 months. I saw her from a distance. Because, oh, my parents can't know about all this bullshit. You know, it was a 7-month point before they mentioned it. But long and short of it is, what I'm saying is, half of these people won't even meet in person. So, what's the point? Anyway, I've got my sister to do it. I was going to get some of my cousins to do it, but, you know, my family seems to be the type that wants to know all your business and then pass their judgment on all your business and then still not help you out anyway. In some cases, not all cases. I'm going to see someone get planted today, a funeral for, and I've got to leave for that, probably about half an hour. Yeah, I've got to be suit and all that in the car. So anyway, Probably not a great time to mention it to him today. I don't think it would be appropriate. But it's basically my great aunt and her son, which is my dad's cousin, obviously. He's a fairly big guy, so I'm thinking of trying to make a few things for him. And, you know, I've seen him say previously that he doesn't really give a shit about what clothes look like, just so long as they work. And if that's the case, you know, I really need someone other than myself to make clothes for. And there's another friend of my sister's who's a divorced single mum with a guy whose both parents were narcissistic real estate agents, and this son was a only child, spoiled to the shithouse, brought up with narcissistic parents, and you can't really blame the girl for divorcing him for the shit that she went through. So, you know, I know I have had a bad attitude towards single mums in the past, but, you know, I'm realising with some of the things that my sister tells me and whatnot, that love is blind, and you know, women follow their emotions more than men do, but even with men, love is blind as well. And B, the main point, there's plenty of fucking arsehole guys out there, and really speaking, you know, you go out on a limb marrying someone hoping that it's going to last, and you get some narcissistic fucking spoiled arsehole, and of course it don't last. But she is in the same town, or grew up in the same town, and I'm not too certain, I think she might live in the same town, but my sister still knows her on Facebook and whatnot, and she's got at least one son of her own. There might be two kids, I can't really remember. So I might end up seeing if my sister can line her up and use her to do kids' clothes. I have had some theories on production which would sort of simplify things, but you sort of wonder, like, as your speed gets up to the point I'm at, which, you know, is partially due to the fact that I've used a lot of power tools and stuff like that, like circular saws that you've got to cut down a set line and things like that. You have a pretty good hand and eye coordination. And it's sort of one of these adaptable skills, just like going from earth-moving equipment into driving forklifts or you know, vice versa sort of thing. It's once your brain's wired to use three different controls at once, plus direction and steering, you know, your brain can sort of transfer over to another piece of equipment without too much of a trouble, so long as it's got a similar number of controls. It's sort of a little bit the same with sewing, you know. I might be able to automate some of this, and I'm sure I can, and I've realised that I probably don't even need a computer control it. I can probably make enough mechanical mechanisms or simple sort of mechanisms that are just switches and relays and linear actuators, possibly solenoids, that, you know, would do a lot of what I needed to do, along with fabric guides. But why aren't most things already done with robots? Well, there's a good reason why fabrics aren't like the car industry. I've seen videos, and you guys probably have too, of, you know, welding robots. I've seen one from South Korea, and fucking hell, there was like about 300 robots, 150 each side of the line, and the cars are coming down the line, and these robots are going flat to the board, welding all this shit up. And you know, that's I don't know if that was off Mega Factor. I don't know what show it was off, but it was off some fucking thing. I don't know. Might have even been YouTube or something, but it was a long time ago that I saw it. But why isn't sewing done with robots? Well, it's simple, really. Very simple. Fabric is not stiff. Now, if you starch everything that you cut out and iron it flat and then starch it, or well, I think you use starch when you iron, you can use robotics the whole way. But, you know, starch isn't always terribly cheap. But I'm sure with the US subsidised corn and starch derived from that and starch reused, you know, because you can sort of dissolve it in water and then, you know, boil the water down to re-get it out. The cost of starch and the cost of even boiling water down to reuse it, it might be a little bit steep, you know, to even deal with that. And I'm not saying that if nobody's tried it, like if you've thought of it, somebody's already tried it, because there's plenty of times where people think of things and somebody hasn't already tried it. And it may or may not work. But I know for a fact that completely heavily starched items can be put into robotics without a problem. And I've seen it done. But the trouble is, it's just the fact that, like for instance, look at all the wrinkles, you know, of some of these things all sitting down here. You know, it's all wrinkled up and whatnot, and well, that's it, it's soft. And that's the thing, it's soft, not hard. So you can't run it through robots purely because you can't stop it sewing over any wrinkles. Purely because it will not maintain its own shape, unlike steel. I've also seen production lines of electronics manufacture. And a lot of these ones, you know, there's ones that you can buy for about $1,000. I think they're about 800 US or something like that, or I don't know, around a $1,000 mark, or $1,200 or something. They are robots that will do accuracy to within 0.2 of a mil every time. Well, the proper full-blown ones go to 0.08 of a mil every time, repeatable accuracy. Well, you know, so long as you're within probably, you know, 0.3, 0.35 of a mil, you could expect to keep fitting chips into a circuit board. And that's what they do with electronics. Chips and resistors and all the components are fed in on big lines, and they've got little robot arms that just boom, 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 boom. Sometimes they've got one either side that just whacks all the stuff in, you know, and, you know, even soldering, they've worked out how to solder with robotics. And so you can have electronics that are manufactured on the production line. In fact, there's one in Perth, Western Australia, that makes amplifier systems. And the like, that's fully roboticized. But this is why it's all gone to Bangladesh, China, and now Vietnam, is because you've got to feed it through flat. But, you know, until you deal with a lot of ultrasonics or stuff like that to sort of, or ways and means to get the wrinkles out, you know, you're going to sort of trip over with robotics. And there are semi-robotics used already, you know, and there are things that you can do, but if you get a wrinkle in it, it's fucked. You've got to pull it all out, you know. And let me tell you, unless you got heavy zigzag and like really wide zigzag and loose tension, it takes a while to pull it out. If you got loose tension and good zigzag, you can put a seam ripper under and just go and get it off pretty quickly, and go again. But you know, it's a wasted operation as a result. But anyway, I've really been thinking along the lines more so of like some of these things that I feed through. By the time I fuck around with robotics that will do it automatically, and some things I would, there are other things that it's just as quick for me to feed it through by hand in a normal sewing machine versus me sitting there like an idiot trying to make sure there's no wrinkles going through, watching it there's no wrinkles going through, trying to pull out any wrinkles that are going through. And there's sort of ways and means that you can sort of, you know, drag it along a table and it'll pull the wrinkles out as you drag along the table. But it's sort of, there's some stupid shit that occurs. Things try and, you know, they get near the end and they sort of start to change direction and shit and you know, if you use a normal foot, they're not always terribly great, because what will happen is, as you got your machine here, there's your feed dogs and they will pull it through, but this is flat. That's flat underneath. Now what ends up happening is it'll pull the bottom through faster than the top. So if you've got two sides of something, like I think this is the bottom of a pair of pants, what it can do is it can pull the bottom faster than the top, and you get to the end and you have sort of like this bullshit where it sort of, it'll miss a line. So you'll have a piece that's folded over, and instead of you get to the end of the fold and they're like that, the top one will be like that. It'll be skidded further because it was getting moved on the bottom but not the top. That is more of a problem than you would otherwise expect it to be. I mean, it's ridiculous that this hasn't been sort of taken notice of earlier, because it is actually quite a problem. But they still build all these machines like this. But there's the answer. It's got wheels in it. That's actually how it's mounted on the machine like that. It's got little wheels in the bottom. There's two of them. That's pretty much your answer for that shit. So I'm probably going to have to buy a few more of those. That one's my mother's one, that little foot. But, you know, sometimes you just think like, shit, you got to stand there and make sure no wrinkles go through. And if you're going to stand there and make sure no wrinkles go through, you might as well just be, you know, have a bloody seam guide holding the fabric to that point there and just bloody feed it through yourself. Really speaking, you know, because if you've got to keep a constant watch on these things, I don't know, it might be the case that you can sort of watch about 3 at once and have them all run by robots, but I sort of wonder. Now there's another option too, and that is to make stuff for people who can't get run-of-the-mill stuff. In other words, big fatties. Thinner people and smaller people, like the Vietnamese wife of one of my workmates, she's been dressing in kids' clothes for years. I mean, she just gets clothes made for a 10-year-old or something like this, or a 12-year-old, and just puts those on, you know, and that's what she's been buying for herself for years. That's not a problem, but you get some big, well, what the alt-right likes to call land whales out there, and, you know, these girls need to cover that BBW, you know, bits. So, you know, these girls need clothes just like the rest of the world, really, except they need a lot bigger clothes. And, you know, this is one of these things that there's a market out there to custom-make clothes. Now, it doesn't just stop with big women. And I think looking for big women, you'd need to be one of those bloody body positivity sort of things. That's what you'd sort of need to infiltrate to get yourself customers, some of these, you know, body positivity things. I'm not always into all agreeing with everything they say, because there's a hell of a lot of irresponsible behaviour. You know, not all of them, but probably 80% of them, maybe more, likely more. It's just purely eating that's caused them to be who they are. But, you know, is there a potential customer? You know, I'm not going to sit there and judge them. And I know of a case of someone on medication that gave them what looked like a 5 months pregnant belly due to fluid retention caused by medication. I went to school with, well, on my school bus, you didn't go to the same school, was a girl who only had one kidney, put on a huge amount of weight and couldn't do anything about it just because only one kidney was filtering. And the long and short of it is that, there's other hormonal issues, and what was the other one I come across? There was celiac. Yeah, they can whack on a bunch of weight until they realise that they're actually celiacs. And, so there's potential there, and you think, oh, well, that's a bit of a market. Now, the other one is, I'm not saying this is always the case, but some of you guys have probably seen it, especially those of you who deal with truck drivers a lot, as I do. But about 1 in 25 truck drivers are big boys, and I mean big boys. Even in Australia, where we don't have as many fat people as America, you see some really big people. But it's definitely a truck industry thing. I can tell you that right now. It's truckers, and not just truckers. Even some of the guys I've seen in some of these offices, trucking joints, have got a fair bit on. But that's another option there. But there's another one that I'd overlooked previously, and that is making costumes. Now, sure, it's a little bit more specialised, but, it's a big market with all these anime enthusiasts and all this sort of stuff out there and whatnot. There's all these friggin' Comic-Con type people, these cosplay people and all this other stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the market of that as well, quite a lot. And so there's other options, but I'm really thinking that it might be an option, custom-made clothing. People like the idea of custom-made clothing, but not something that looks fairly rough on it. So either I've got to work out how to raise the standards, and there's ways and means, but it's a lot of fiddling and fucking around, or make clothes for people who are just happy to get anything that fits them, and I think that's a rather good option. I'll go ahead and I'll make normal enough clothes or basic clothes for those who are dedicated to buying made in Australia stuff, but there's not. Older people are into that market, definitely. But with older people comes older women who are the same sort of people that I've bought second-hand machines off, and they know something that's not as professionally made or not as heavily detailed versus something that is. And even the shirt, I look at the shirt I've got on, and there's so many bits and bobs. If you go around to the back, the amount of bloody seams and crack, it's phenomenal how many parts that make up some of these shirts. I mean, even my pants here, look, they go off midway there, and then it becomes another whole piece. Oh, hang on, I've worked out what this is. That's an extra bit to make the knees heavier. Shit, I never even realised. That's another piece over the top. Yeah, never even realised. I knew these are fairly heavy fabric, but that's doubled up just for the knees. Anyway, some of these older women, they can tell when something's been done really good or not really good. And there's ways and means that you can sort of, hide things or stick to certain things that are simpler, or, put on, fake cuffs or whatever. And collars ain't terribly hard, but there's ways and means of getting around things. But they can tell if something's been homemade or not. And, there's some things just look homemade, and you don't even need to be an expert to tell that they're homemade. But anyway, that's just a couple of ideas that have come along. I'd probably, still go ahead and make a fair few clothes. And you may say, oh, but there's no money in it. Yeah, you'd be surprised. You go and buy fabric. I mean, this stuff's $2 a metre. But you won't find a great deal of it that's $2 a metre. A lot of fabric over here, you're going to be paying $8 a metre or $10 a metre for. But, you can find fairly good stuff for $2 a metre. But you start buying it off Alibaba Wholesale. 5 kilometres, like damn near 3 miles at a time, and the price drops like you would not believe. Oh man, it drops. Now sometimes you can even buy just 1 kilometre at a time, which is not a great deal more than half a mile. It's about half a mile plus another 200 yards. And, the prices are pretty good there. They get very good once you're buying 5 kilometres at a time, and most of them request that's your minimum order is 5 kilometres. And they get very cheap. I would hope in that 5 kilometres I could get several different colours. Yeah. The other fact is that they mark up the price 5 to 6-fold between retail and wholesale price. I am not joking. And that in and of itself makes things fairly competitive if you can pay $2 a metre. But trust me, I can pay a lot less than $2 a metre for fabric from China, and then you become all the more competitive. But it doesn't always have that, professional finishing touch to it. But, you can just stick to more simpler things that don't need a lot of trims and stuff, like tracksuit pants, like basic trousers. I mean, you look at the bottom of that, and is it a great deal difference from the bottom of this, except that just this edge is folded under, There's things you would be able to make very close to the quality that you're seeing in the shop already, and other things like some of these shirts with umpteen collars and this and that, where it's always going to have that not quite professional look to it. But anyway, I do have ideas of, if I thought this was going to fly, actually making a van up that, had all the gear I needed in it, a few rolls of fabric and a table with a sewing machine mounted on it, one that sort of, was like fixed, solid to the table, and sort of going with that, battery system, inverter and whatnot. But you'd say, I'd have to charge at least $50 per shirt or pants or whatever, and another $20 after that. Well, I'll tell you something. You want to go and get these damn shirts for fat guys now, they're already $50 in the shop, and you have to drive to the damn shop and find something that fits you, versus someone coming to your house and building something, making something that's custom made. So, there's options there, and there's ways and means that, you can be at a market every Sunday, or even a certain particular car park every certain time a week, and that becomes your shop front in effect, without actually renting out a shop front. And market stalls are fuck all. There's some of them are like $25, for the entire Sunday, and that's your 1 day a week that you're there, that people can come and get stuff made up. If you don't want to travel all around the damn place, and sort of, they don't want you, turning up to their house and seeing all their stuff laying all over the place and whatnot. But some of these are different ideas that occur, and hopefully I can automate some of it, but I don't know that I'll be automating all of it. But